everybody, JK here from Animator Island. Welcome to today's live stream. We're going to be doing some gesture drawing today, and welcome. If you're interested in joining in, you're more than welcome to. So grab a sketchbook or open your favorite piece of art software and we can do some drawing together. If you just want to hang out and watch drawing being done and maybe ask some questions in the chat or comment or just, as I said, hang out, that's cool too. It's going to be kind of a short session today. We have Easter baskets to be blessed this afternoon. So we're going to be popping off to do that. And it's Russian, or not Russian Orthodox, but it is Orthodox Easter weekend. So that's what we're headed off to this afternoon. But I wanted to get in some art before we did that because it's been a busy weekend so far. A lot of stuff going on and there wasn't a lot of time for art. So let's get to it. As I said, you're welcome to chat away in the chat, and we'll just jump in and do some drawing at the same time and see how it goes. Today, I'm going to be continuing my attempt to do what I call the 3 times method. And the 3 times method, as you see at the top here, if you were in the last gesture drawing live stream, is where we're taking a photo reference and we're going to do 3 drawings from it. The first one is going to be much closer to the actual reference itself. We're going to be taking our time to study the pose and the anatomy and just try and keep it a little tighter. And then we're going to push things for the next attempt. And then in the third attempt, I will apply some of the proportions that I use or I'm going to be using as my default style to try and take it to another level. And as you see, this is from the last gesture drawing session that we had live. The first one there is much closer to the reference, and then we push things a little more, and then we push things further. And the hope is that as we do this, we improve the pose, we understand it better, we get it into our bloodstream a little bit more. And I find that it's a really useful practice. So, all right, we're going to be moving on to this next image. Arthritic is here. So, hey, how's it going? And then looks like Maria's here, all from Brooklyn. Doing theater work today. That's exciting. I'd be interested to know, are you in the front end of the theater work or back end, or there's a lot of different moving parts to theater work. I remember doing some of that in my high school days, and I loved it. I probably would have been a live actor if I hadn't gone into animation, or that would have been one of the things that I pursued because I find it a lot of fun. You can just really get into it and just animation too. But in animation, you have to like maintain the character via drawings, and it's almost more taxing in a way because you have to sit there and feel it with every line that you draw on if it's like an angry pose or something. Yeah, okay. She said both playwriting and putting together playbills for upcoming shows. Well, there you go. Good deal. Glad to hear it. Well, thanks for stopping by while you're in the middle of doing the other work. All right, so today, as I said, we're going to do these 3 drawings. So we're going to start with this first one. We talked a little bit in the last live stream about how you can do gesture drawings under a time limit, which can be really useful, usually 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes. Sometimes you can go up to 5, maybe even 10. But at 10, you're not really talking about gesture anymore. You're talking about like a full drawing. But today, we're not going to be putting a time limit on any of these. I'm going to be doing 3 of them and really trying to absorb the pose and the anatomy and things like that. So we'll start with this first one. Make sure we got all and everything on a new layer and all that good stuff. And as I say in most of the sessions that we do, I'm using a modified version of the Youssef technique, which is usually starts with our kind of main line, and then we put in our solid forms such as the skull and our torso, which in this pose looks like it's coming down here like that. So it's pretty straight, and we're going to keep it that way for our first attempt. And then later I will go back or as we move on to the other poses, other versions of this pose, I'm going to probably push that a little bit more. And then we've got kind of our hips are in here. So we got our pelvis, which this is why it's the modified version, because I tend to make that more triangular than the official version of this technique. And then we can get our legs in Just kind of keeping things rough and loose for now so that we can go back later and do whatever we need to do to make everything work well. Other arm down here like that. Okay, so this is going to be the roughest and loosest gesture uh, as we're working using this method. Now, as I've said in the past, using just the lines that I've put down now, actually, I should probably put in kind of where the face direction is. But using just these lines, I have enough information now that I could go in tomorrow or a week from now and I could still finish out this drawing because I have the core elements that are necessary for me to know what is happening for the most part. If I really wanted to, I'd probably put in the directional axis on the torso and pelvis, but I mean, I'm going to work on it now. The point is, once you have something as loose as this, which you saw I did in, I don't know how long that took, but it was probably under a minute or so. You have everything that you need. And if you're ever working live from a live model, this is a really great way to do things because that model can only hold a pose for so long. And so even if initially they have a very strong pose, gravity and just the fact that muscles get tired will slowly reduce that pose. And so if you can nail that pose in a very core way like this initially, you can go in using your knowledge or even reference from the live model, and you can put in the rest on top of that. So I'm going to build the rest on top of that from this point, and so we'll add in different elements. This is kind of a thing where at this stage, you could work on any particular parts that speak to you. So you just saw I drew in the neck there just because for some reason that was where I wanted to focus right this second. But I could have started with, this upper arm. I could have started with this lower leg. I could start anywhere from this point. But I find that if you start with that main line, it really helps because that anchors everything else. And then if you start with those solid forms and then you put in the angles of hips and shoulders, that works really well. All right, so we're gonna just kind of flesh this out a little bit. One thing that I've been trying to do a little bit more, which we talked about in the live stream on chunkiness and form, is to use more straights in my work. I really love using curves, like just beautiful. I don't want to call them hard curves, but they are. They're like really rich, deep curves. I really enjoy doing that. But I find that if I practice using kind of this straights technique, I can not only measure angles and things a little bit better, but it also allows me to get that kind of form really pushed in there without making it turn into just kind of, I don't want to say jelly, but it's a much uh, it's a much looser and flowy feel when I go into my extreme curves. Now here on the hips, I would probably go ahead and do my extreme curve rather than a straight because that's just got this really nice flow to it. So I wanna include that in there. But we'll keep going. Aspects and details. Um, without being too detailed, but I just want to kind of capture the different parts of this pose that now I can see here that I've put not enough space between these legs. So I will have to fix that. So we'll go back in and tweak that slightly. But it's good when you're doing gesture drawings to continually check and recheck and then make adjustments as you go, because now's a great time to be able to make adjustments since everything is still pretty rough and you don't have to worry about like redoing giant swaths of it, which I think is very useful. So this is the time to make your changes. See, now I'm getting into like the socks and the shoes, and that's really stupid for me to do, honestly, regarding gestures, because I don't, that's not what gestures are about. So I am going to try and stop myself from getting too detailed because now's not the time for that. This is the time for the larger stuff and then figuring. Um, I can always go back and add in detail later, but it does happen. You get caught up in the detail sometimes, and that's okay too. It's just you got to keep it in mind. I feel like that knee is too low. I'm not sure. Anyway, okay, I'll jump back up to the top here and we'll continue along. Now here, there's some really nice examples in this photo of particular muscles that are being engaged, right? They're active muscles. So we can see where the musculature is coming around and over itself and folds and different things like that. I have the option, since I'm doing a little bit more of a study than a straight up gesture. I have the option to putting those things in, or I can kind of leave them out and simplify a little bit more. I am not sure. I think I might just simplify for now, and then we can always go back in and add those. But they are very prominent, and I like seeing them. So I do hesitate to take them out entirely. I really love this salute pose, or the arm here, which I'll point out in a second after I finish that line. This flat right at the top, right, going across the top, from the arm into the hand, this flow is just very nice, and it's a great aspect of the pose that we want to keep. So even though there's some bend and curve in there, because I'm and first one, I probably shouldn't. I should do this for a future one, but that straight in there is very nice, and it's something that I want to capture because it just flows so well, and I think that it's a really important aspect of this pose. I also like that the shoulder here is kind of pushed forward a little bit, and her hand is kind of going back behind her. So if I can capture that in the gesture, that's a beautiful thing to be able to capture, which means that we need to, indicate what's on top of and what's behind and that sort of thing, which can be tricky at times, but we'll also probably add in some shading, which will help to uh, convey that. Now I can see as I'm working here that I don't have. Well, I guess my blocking's okay. I feel like this back hand is too high up, maybe almost. I might have made the legs a little too long. I'm not sure. I think one of the key issues is the head is not it's not quite to scale to size, so I could probably go back in and fix that a little bit, and that'll alleviate some of the issue that I'm having here. Um, but overall, I think that this is working as a pose. I can get the scoop of the shirt in. Probably that will give us some more definition of where things are. And so we go like that. And then this belt, the way that it curves around is very nice for kind of indicating what's coming forward and what's going behind and that sort of thing. So we could probably leave that there. We don't have to do all the clothes. We could if we wanted to, but we don't have to. That will just kind of get us a base start. Infinite Imagination says hello, and Love Soda says sup. Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. I'm just working on some gestures. Thanks for stopping by. So now, as we talked about in the last one with these up top, I do like putting in a little bit of shading that just kind of elevates everything a little bit. It doesn't even necessarily need to be uh, real world shading. Like I don't need to go in and actually add the shadows where they are. I like to put things in where they kind of accentuate um, some aspect. So I'll put in some extra like curves and some extra line and shading to give a feeling of the flow and of like where things are being pushed and that sort of thing. And then I can also go back in and indicate like what's behind and what's above. This is interesting because the 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 leg is coming, the left leg is coming out toward us, but then the left foot is receding behind the right foot. So that's tricky to capture, but I'll try and get it in there where this kind of goes backwards, but then this also goes backwards. So that's a fascinating little extra bit that is trickier to capture, but we'll give it a shot. And then, as I said, because this arm is going back in space, I'm going to go ahead and give that some shading so that later when I come back and look at this, I'm like, oh, right, that arm was definitely back in space, and that'll help me in the future. Give it some shadow here and a little bit of shading there. And there we go. So this is what we've got for our first attempt at this particular reference photo. I think it works. I don't think that it's, bad. I think we've got generally the proportions in the right place. I've got things nailed down where I want them to be for the most part. Kept things rough. There's a few issues I can see. The left arm here is not quite the size and distance that it needs to be. So I'm going to just go ahead and tweak that slightly using the magic of technology. Because this needs to actually be a little bit more out, I think. Yeah, something like that. And then I could just go ahead and tweak that, and we'll get that back in there and kind of reconnect things in the right spot. It won't be perfect, but that's okay, because it's just keeping things generally pretty loose and rough. And I do like that line of the muscle. It's a really nice form, but I don't know if I can capture it. Anyway, I could noodle all day on this, but I'm going to move on to the next pose, because as I mentioned at the start of the stream, this is going to be kind of a shorter stream today. I've got some other places to be this afternoon. Weekends tend to be family time, so I'm just stealing away 45 minutes or so to do some drawing. Okay, so we've got this first attempt, and now what I'm going to do, like I did in these first ones, is I'm going to exaggerate some areas. I'm going to push some things. I'm going to try and see if I could take it to not necessarily another level, but a different place, so that I can get ideas down that will help me in the future to make stronger decisions, right? So we have realistic decisions that we've made in this first one, and now I'm going to make some artistic decisions that push things in another direction, or yeah, I guess another direction is the way to put it. So I'm trying to, and I'm gonna stop for a second, and because I just did a circle for the head, and I want to say something real quick. I've been trying to break a bad habit, or what I consider a bad habit, of starting with the head. I would rather start with the main line and then put the head attached to the main line. So I'm going to get rid of that circle, but it's like, it's an old habit that I have had for 30 years of doing art, or whatever, however long it's been that I've been doing that sort of thing. I don't even know where it started, but I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to try and start myself with the main line of the pose, because I find that I produce much better results when I stay loose in that beginning stage. And that first line, which obviously is a bunch of lines here, if I don't start with the head, I find that it just ends up turning out better in the end. So once I have that, then I can go ahead and put on my my head, and I can kind of indicate where my shoulders and hips are going to be, and the tilts on them and things, and I can add in extra bits and details from there. And then I can, there are a couple different, you can go in different order. Like right on the first one you saw, I started with the torso and the hips. On this one, I'm kind of moving on to indicating the arms, and then I'll go back and do the torso and hips. And I'm trying to keep this one just kind of a little bit more flowing. Okay, so our torso was much more vertical on the last one. Oh, Eileen's here. Hey, Eileen. Yep, we're doing gestures today, just a handful of them. Going to be working on the same technique as I used in the last video, which is to do each one 3 times to try and exaggerate and accentuate as I go to see, what can be pushed and what needs to stay a little more solid. So in this case, I'm going to Um, I'm gonna push the angles on the pelvis and the torso a little bit more to see what kind of result that gets me. And then I'll go back in and add in the extra bits. Sorry, I'm looking at this angle here is particular, and I'm trying to see where I feel like we need to add in the center line of the actual torso here so that we can see that there's kind of this twist going on. And this is where my foolishness of not following the actual method comes into play, because on the pelvis, when the pelvis is a box, which is the actual method that you're supposed to use, it's much easier to determine angles using that box. In this case, it would be probably something like this, I think. Or yeah, you're going to see more of the top. It's going to be facing down. It's a lot harder to do that with this triangular form that I'm using. So I'll probably jump back and forth between the two depending on the pose. But point is, I'm going to try and keep things a little bit looser there. So then we've got kind of this rounded curve, which we want to keep a little bit straight here, I think. Keep that straight and then really get our curve in nicely here, because I think that that's one of the main curves of this form, which works out really well. Then we'll kind of come down with that off of the rib cage and get our knee in here. Yeah, it's working out well. Okay. Knee in, coming off into calf muscle, down into the foot. And then this leg, same thing, except it's also coming in the front. So this foot is going to be here. And as I said, to have this knee coming forward is interesting. And so once again, I've done the same thing that I did in the previous one, and now I've caught myself twice. I've shrunken down the legs at the knees to a point where it's kind of breaking things, because I need room for the foot to come forward while the other knee is coming forward. So I'll probably alter that slightly in the next version, now that I see that I'm making a similar mistake here. And I think, yeah, I think it's fair to call it a mistake, because it's not going to work. It wouldn't necessarily be a mistake if it worked and it was just an artistic decision, but in this case, I don't think it's going to work. So that's an issue. All right, and then we'll come back up here. Let's see if I can get in this kind of muscle shape, because I really do like it. Come in there. I'll have to tweak it slightly, but there's a really nice there's a nice muscle going on here that I kind of want to capture if I can. We've got this really nice overlap. The pectoral muscle, I'm pretty sure we've got, this is pectoral going into the bicep, I think. I don't think it's, yeah. It's one of those things where I got to get my anatomy back in shape. I've neglected it for too long, and now but actually, interesting story. Yesterday morning, I spent 1 hour reserving 40 some books from my local library online, almost exclusively dealing with anatomy and the figure and things like that. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be under mountains of books that I have on reserve, which I'm really looking forward to. But it's a great resource. So if you have a library in your area that that you can reserve things from, it's a terrific asset to have. Definitely recommended. You can also find a lot of resources online, thankfully now. But for me, I think for some reason, books just have an extra level of charm and and delight. So I still enjoy learning from books rather than necessarily some other things. Um, and then I know Maria was floating around earlier. Maria, I did just get in the uh, Light Princess. What? No, it wasn't the Light Princess because George MacDonald book that you had mentioned. Started reading it. Um, didn't get too far into it because I just got it in from the library yesterday, but it is in, so I'm looking forward to reading it. With the witch and the wolf, and that's about as far as I got before I had to stop for the day. Anyway, libraries, good things. Okay, this arm is not going well. I could tell, so I probably will come back and redo it. I'm getting tight and I'm getting too detailed, and it's getting problematic. So I'm going to move on to the other arm, and we're just gonna keep moving so that I don't get so caught up um, in the details that I kind of just lose everything I'm going for here because it can easily happen. Can overthink gestures a lot. So I'll get really caught up in the minutia of the anatomy, and then suddenly, oh, everything's dead and broken and not nice and fluid anymore. So we're gonna kind of smooth some things out that otherwise wouldn't be smoothed out. Okay, so we got our neck in this area. And we need to kind of fit the head back on a little bit more, get that jaw in and such. And then I feel like we could tilt the head back even more than we did in the first. So we'll get a little more curve in there. And get our lines in. So these kind of bigger swooping lines I put in so that I can get a feel for, again, the kind of the movement of it. So that's a little bit where it'd probably be for this second version. Got a little unwieldy, larger than the first, and oops, let's keep it uniform. But we can kind of get it in there. And so it's gonna be like the second attempt. As you can see, it's possibly not as true to the model, but it's going to get a little more of the of different feelings in there and stuff. Go back to the chat real quick. Maria says, so glad you have the story. Hope you like it. Find MacDonald plays with some wonderful themes and sympathies. Yeah, I agree. All of his work that I've read so far, he's a great storyteller, and you can tell that there's this truth behind his story, right? It's so fantastic. It's such fantasy in so many areas, but there's just this underlying thread of truth and just genuineness. Is that the word? Yeah, this genuine quality underneath everything that he writes, or at least everything that I've read so far. Just really enjoy it. There was this one bit in the beginning of the book, and then I'm going to get to this last one because then I'll have to finish up for the day. But there's this one bit in the first part of the book where it jumps from past tense to present tense in like one sentence and then goes back to past tense. And that drove me a little bit crazy as a writer. But I was like, I'll ignore it, George, but this really frustrates me that you just did that. I will see if there was a reason he did it. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but in the very beginning of the book, he just randomly goes to a present tense line and then he jumps back to past tense. It almost felt wrong. It was like he missed a piece of editing, which I don't think he did, but it was just weird. Okay. There we go for number 2. So let's jump into number 3 now. As we did with these first ones, I'm going to scoot these over and then number them because I want to draw the third one still next to the original reference. I'm getting visually so far away from the reference that to jump back and forth with my eyes is it's just going to be too much. There's no reason for it because we're working digitally. So why not make it easier on ourselves? So I'm going to move those over, but I'm going to label them 1 and 2 so that I know that those, I guess I don't need the circles. so that I know that that was the order I did them, and then I can reorder them after the fact. And then we're going to go back to the reference, and we're going to apply the proportions that I want to use, and we're going to push things, and we're going to see what happens. And I'm going to kind of just push stuff, not necessarily to the breaking point, but I'm going to play and experiment in a way that I'm no longer worried about trying to be accurate or even do a nice drawing. This last one that I'm going to do is me just being free almost. And this is an area that I need to work on personally. So maybe it's something that you struggle with too as an artist. I need to just loosen up more and just let things go and just try stuff. So this is going to be kind of a playful experimentation version that we have at the end here. So given that, I'm going to start again with my kind of main line, and I'm going to get that in there. I'm going to probably get my head form in. What if we really pushed the head even more, like to the side slightly? We got that in there, and then we'll get this neck in, and really just kind of, we could almost get the arm up so that the salute is like horizontal. We're really just going wild here, for why not? Let's see what we do and what happens. Because if it, if everything goes wrong, oh well, no big deal. I've made the torso too big for the proportions I want, so I'm getting rid of that, and I'm going to go back in, and we're going to put in a smaller torso, and then we'll get our hips in that we're just going to tilt even more than they were before. We'll get this back leg in. That's too much, so we'll just tone that down a smidge, and then we'll get this knee. I'm going to bring the knee over now instead of what I did before, right? Like in these other ones, I was compressing that area a little too much. So instead, I'm going to go extreme, and I'm going to push the knee all the way over, just because I can, and we're doing something different. And then I'm going to get this foot off the ground even. This is not accurate to the reference, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm playing, I'm just having fun, and I'm trying some things. So I'm going to do it that way. And then we'll get this other leg in. Let's see, we'll come down here and come down here. And we'll get this other foot in a little more close to what it actually is. And we'll have a little, if we can get some overlap in there, that would be great. So I'm changing this pose at this point. This is no longer the pose that it was, and that's okay. We're gonna play with it. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna see what we come up with. And in these other ones, I like this kind of straight line here from the rib cage down to the pelvis. So I'm gonna keep that in there. And then this was also an area where I said a straight would have been nice, so we'll keep a straight in there. And this is the kind of thing where I would, if I was doing this for a character, right, rather than just a gesture or a reference, I would probably go back and tweak things after the fact, because I'm pushing too far, I think, in my opinion. I think I'm pushing too far. We'll see once I kind of finish this up. But it feels right now like I'm pushing this a little too far. I don't know though. And let's get like a reverse angle in here for fun. That is totally inaccurate. I don't even think the human, oh, what the? Hey there, Procreate, you never crash. What are you doing? All right, sorry about that. Back to it. Look, you interrupted my flow, Procreate. I think that might be the second time since I've owned an iPad that Procreate has crashed on me like that. And the nice thing is it saves, so it's not even like a big deal, because look, it's back and I'm pretty much where I was, so whatever. But it did pull me out of the flow a little bit, but that's okay. Okay. Get this. Now we'll get our elbow in, because that's kind of a nice hard angle right there to break up some of the other aspects. Got our salute in. Salute. And then we've got our other shoulder over here. got our neck in this way, which we're kind of pushing. And we'll get some center lines in just so that I have a little more flow in there. Cool. So, and then I can go back and mess with stuff. But let me fix the head too, because as from before, we need to get a little more solid of a head shape to match everything. Cool. All right. So for this final one that we just did, oh, and let's see, got a couple more chat things, and then I'll go over it. Maria's talking about again the book there. That's a really good insight. I hadn't thought of that. You could read it on the screen if you want. But that's a cool insight. I didn't think of it that way. I was thinking of it more in the technical sense. But you're right. That might have been one of those areas that I should have realized there was some play there. Funny story. My wife often edits the writing that I do, because writing is another thing that I do, and she is a software engineer, so she is very technical minded. Got a really sharp mind, but in terms of the creative side, I will put things in that I like because I just like them, and then she'll be like, "This is grammatically wrong, so you need to remove it." And I'll be like, "No, you're destroying my beautiful words." So we go back and forth, but she's usually right. Anyway, I agree. I didn't think about that part, kind of bringing you into the witch. And then Eileen says, I assume of Procreate. It almost never crashed on me. And same. It's one of the most stable programs I've ever used in my life, which is one of the reasons I love it. It's not only a great program, but it's also very stable. And that's terrific. I just am so thrilled with that. When I first got the iPad, they just released an update for Procreate and it broke everything. But they were like on it in less than 2 hours and fixing it and putting out a patch. And it worked beautifully after that. So good stuff. Okay, so going back to this this final pose, you can see now, and we'll look at all of them together. You can see this final pose is different than the original. It's much more pushed. It's got almost a different feel to it even, but it's a nice way to try something new, try something a little different. I'm going to go in and add in my kind of swooping lines a little bit too. This will be slightly more that way, and then this will be that way more. And we've got our face up in here, and I would probably come down off of this to this back leg. Really needs to feel solid. So we'll kind of ground that a little bit more. I'm overdoing it, but I'm just kind of getting an idea of where I would need to. I really want certain areas to shine here. And because I'm going to later go back and use this as reference, I want to put that aspect in so that I can keep that feel for the future, if that makes sense. Because later I won't maybe have quite the same feel for it as doing it live and the first time. So this is kind of my way of going back in and putting in aspects that will be useful for me to know in the future, that so that I remember it. Okay, it's probably good enough. Right. Let's get that in there. Okay. So there we go. There's our 3 gestures for this particular pose. I will reorder them really quickly and put a number 3 next to that one. The joy and beauty of layers. I don't have to worry about interrupting the other things. There we go. All right. Number 3. Whoops. So there we go. There are 3 attempts today for the gestures that we worked on, or the one gesture we worked on. I hope that was useful for anybody else. If not, it was at least useful for me, and I appreciated folks hanging out and chatting about some different topics and things. I would definitely encourage you, if you don't practice gestures often and you want to get better at figure drawing or character design and things, they're really helpful to do. And this technique of kind of doing things 3 times over is also very useful. As I sit back right now in my chair and I look at the screen at these 3 gestures, I think each of them have different charm to them. I almost appreciate most the first one for its dimensionality. I feel like I've lost a little bit of the dimensional quality in the other two, especially this last one. This last one is very fluid and nice, and I like it, but I've lost something in it. So I'm almost tempted to go in and do a fourth one at this point that tries to combine some of that chunky and form quality of the first with the fluidity of the third. And I think that I could come up with something really nice if I did that. Don't have the time right this second, but maybe that'll be something for another day or even later this evening while I'm winding down. But that's about all I've got for today. I do want to mention that we have another live stream coming up very soon. It will be Monday, coming up in 2 days, I think, at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. That is the normal time that I do a weekly live stream. We will be talking about noses, I believe. That may change, but it's probably going to be about noses. Last week we covered eyes, so we might as well move on to noses. And at that point, I mean, we can probably guess that Miles will come next. And we'll be talking about that, do a little bit of a lecture and then some analysis. And we'll figure out what kind of noses I want to put onto characters going forward. And that's about it. One other question we said, Evan says he was using sketchbook. If you mean he being me, then no, I was using Procreate. You can use a sketchbook for gestures. I really like newsprint, which I mentioned in a previous live stream. Newsprint is great for gestures because it's cheaper than very nice paper, and it's got a toothiness that really it can get some really beautiful lines in that. So I definitely recommend if you're going to do it physically, grab yourself some newsprint. But I like working in Procreate for these sort of things because I can move stuff around and cheat a little bit. All right, that's it. Maria says, thanks for a great session. Thanks for stopping by. I hope that the play stuff goes well and keep us posted how it's going and that sort of stuff. And thanks for stopping by, everybody. Hopefully, I will see you Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern. If not, there's always the recordings, and I will try and jump in next week as well and do another gesture drawing live stream. So if you're interested in that, look forward to that too. Okay. Have a good one, and we'll see you next time.